This is Steph, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting from New Haven, Connecticut.
It's up now. The video's up. The video's up.
Thank you.
Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to join me on an exploration of what makes the Elm City tick. Now, depending on whom you ask, Tweed New Haven Airport either makes New Haven tick and hum or gums up the works with air and noise pollution. This debate has been going hot and heavy in the news lately. On this radio show, you've heard one side of the story. Today, we're going to hear the other side of the story from people who live there. Three neighbors of the airport are here in the WNHH studio to tell us about the work they've been doing to try to keep their neighborhood livable. Say hello to Sean O'Brien,
Hi.
Tanya Giacomini, and Rachel Harima.
Hello.
Thanks for coming in, folks, and thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So you folks just had a victory for grassroots organizing in the Morris Cove neighborhood. At the last minute, promoters of expanding service at Tweed New Haven Airport tried to get the state legislature to pass a law that contained a provision that would allow them to pave another 1,000 feet, which we once inaccurately described as 100 feet in a news article. You guys said, no, it's 1,000 feet, big difference. They wanted to pave the airport another 1,000 feet so that, in their view, they could lure air service from Chicago, Florida, maybe D.C.
And I just want to make a quick correction there. Tim Larson at the board meeting on Wednesday said that we're planning on doing 1,500 feet, 1,000 feet in one direction and 500 in the other. So he did say 7,100 feet. We had heard that.
Whoa, that's not what they said publicly.
Right. So this is exactly the root of the problem, I think, and part of the reason that we didn't accept the premise of 6,600.
Okay, so let's step back about tell us what the problem is. So the airport now has a 5,600-foot runway. But what we're really talking about is that the airport now has commercial service to Philadelphia a couple times a day. The business community and the political leadership outside of your neighborhood really wants it to be a bigger airport.
Yep.
Whether they can do that is open to question, but that's what they want.
Right.
And you folks feel that's not a good idea, correct?
No.
So tell me about that.
You want to start, Rachel?
I'll start.
Yep.
So I
I'm
think
going
it
to ask
goes-
you to get real close to the
Okay.
mic.
it starts with the 2009 agreement, right? Because the 2009 agreement had both benefits and concessions on both sides.
Let's just tell people what that is. In 2009, the mayors of East Haven, New Haven, because the airport sits on both sides, signed an agreement that after decades of fighting about the airport, they said, we now have a compromise. We're going to keep the airport at this size. We're going to expand, I guess, the runway that year, but no more than 5,600 feet. And we're going to give some concessions to the neighborhood, correct? And they said, and they also said, that's it.
Right.
We're signing this. We're not going to open up the question again. Done.
The concession to the neighborhood was the limitation
Of the 5,600
to
feet.
5,600 feet. And that was, in addition to being a locally signed memorandum agreement, it was also signed into state law as well. So the state legislature got involved in this. So, and that, as you say, decades of expansion by the airport, environmental concerns, health concerns, safety concerns, expansion by the airport.
So you
environmental
folks thought
concerns, health
2009
concerns.
done. We gave up something, we got something done. The
Right.
nice question.
We
Settle,
gave up
settle.
a lot, and we got a lot.
What'd you get?
We got the limitation of the runway to 5,600 feet. They were done with that. We got it signed into law. No more expansion. And let's live as good neighbors.
And William Murphy says hello. So does Mark Lassoff. Mark, you are asking a question that we're definitely going to get to. I just want to let them tell their side of the story first. So you folks were all living there in 2009. Do you remember this
Yeah.
agreement?
Oh, absolutely.
Were you in favor of the agreement then?
Well, my parents had gone to countless meetings to get that agreement, and it's been basically since the 60s that people were fighting the expansion of the airport, and just my dad is 91 now. My mom is 78.
Mhm.
And so there's so much time and effort on many people's parts that got put into making that agreement happen. And so that was the resolution to all that hard work that went into that.
Sean?
So I grew up in East Haven, and I actually moved away for a while for college, and then I moved back to New Haven.
Did you grow up near the airport?
I did, yeah.
On the
Yep.
other side, Dave. Did you kind of like it?
Exactly.
Did you hang out there and watch the planes fly by and stuff?
Occasionally when I was a
That's
kid.
kind of what boys do, right?
Yeah, well, also my
Girls do
grandmother.
it too.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, why did I think that was a boy thing?
I don't know.
I thought that, like, trucks and planes were kind of boy things. I guess not.
But I mean, at any rate, this is not.
But I wasn't a normal boy. I was into, like, books and music.
Well, I remember my grandfather bringing me down to
Right.
watch the airplanes take off.
And was that
because
fun?
my family's been there since 1959.
You grew up there.
Oh, yeah.
And we played in the marsh behind Robinson and that side of the airport as well, for better or for worse. But yeah, my grandmother is actually also in the Cove. She's been there her entire life. So there's some pretty deep roots in the neighborhood,
Of course.
which is one of the reasons we take a little bit of offense when we're told we're squatters on airport property, basically. So,
So you
Well,
moved
and I-
back. You moved back when?
so I first moved to the other side of the Cove, and then I got my house in 2013 on Alfred Street. Brought my wife back.
Where's
down.
Alfred? Which side?
That's right across. So Dean Street runs parallel with the main runway, and it's right off of Dean Street.
So you're a block away.
If that, I say a block away when asked.
And do you hear it every time a plane goes off?
I certainly do. Yeah.
Just the
As do I.
commercial? Because there's commercial aviation, there's private aviation.
Yeah, we hear it all.
Every plane.
Oh, every plane.
And it's
Oh, yeah.
gotten worse with the jets taking off. The landing seems to be a little better with the new jet service, but the taking off is a very
And why
loud.
is
Very
that?
loud.
Because we're always told they've improved these planes and they're quieter than they were.
They have with the landing. They call them whisper jets, and it's true. The landings are super quiet, but the takeoffs are much louder.
Why is that? Because I'm
don't know.
ignorant about planes, even though I'm a boy.
I think Tim Larson has said that because of the short runway, they have to accelerate and use a lot more engine power to get up quickly. I don't know if that's true. I've just heard that from Tim
So
Larson.
and obviously you're not going to believe everything they tell you, given they told you
Well,
they're
I'm
never going
not
to
gonna say
expand
that,
the live.
but I'm just going to say.
But do you think
know,
he's right that with the longer
I have
runway
no
you wouldn't
idea.
hear him as much? What
I
do you
have
think,
no
Sean?
No, I don't believe anything the airport says, generally speaking.
we have a continuum of
And by the way, the noise is just one factor because when a jet takes off, you smell the jet fuel.
yeah, you do.
There's soot
And
dropped
I'm
on
I'm
houses.
on the seawall side.
Mm.
I'm not as close as Sean.
So what is the seawall side?
The seawall side is Townsend Avenue.
Mhm.
So I definitely hear the jets when the windows are open, and I also smell the jet fuel. Sometimes I actually have to close the windows in the house.
What does it smell like?
It smells like diesel fumes.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of not a nice
And-
smell.
No,
No.
and especially when you have an asthmatic person in the house,
Like me.
and I have a young child. So,
So Rachel, you're asthmatic.
Yeah, I'm more reactive to like ozone and particulate stuff. So, but yeah, the
So
earth-
does this affect your asthma?
Yeah,
oh,
it does.
absolutely.
Yeah, it does.
And you have a kid too who's affected by this.
Yeah, and we have a garden.
Yeah.
And what
Right.
happens with the
Okay.
garden? Does it like metals in the garden or?
You don't know. You don't
Well,
know.
the thing, one of the two of the biggest things are the particulate matter and ozone. Those are the two hugest concerns as far as ground level pollution,
Mm-hmm.
and that is because and also when they're idling. So the idling, it can go. You guys probably know a little bit better because you're closer to it, but it goes anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes of idling.
Yeah, in the
And that can
morning.
happen at 6 a.m.
Right.
So, like the first major plane left at 6:30 this morning, and there was a ton of planes leaving yesterday after the Yale graduation. And stuff
Oh,
like
but those
that.
are
So
private planes.
Some of those are private. Some of those are chartered. And some
Chartered.
of those are regular.
So this is
By
exactly
private, I mean the small ones. You know.
this is exactly the kind of good cop, bad cop thing that goes on between, when we talk to City Hall, when we talk to the airport, when we talk to people who are out of Robinson. The noise and the pollution and the contribution to negative quality of life and negative environmental concerns by the private aviation is usually just passed off as not a big deal or not our problem.
Mhm.
So,
'Cause that's Robinson. That's on East Haven.
Right.
Right.
What's
Not New Haven.
Robinson?
Robinson is Robinson
private aviation?
Yeah, they do the
It's-
charters and the privates, and they sell the avgas and the
So there's
diesel
a question of whom do you go talk to if you want to do
right,
something
which
about
you
it?
know, or you just follow the memorandum of agreement, which happened in 2009, where everybody talked to everybody, and we got a memorandum, and it got signed, and it got into codified into state law.
And
And just to point out, because I didn't get a chance to comment on this, I bought my house in 2012. Off my back deck, I can see the planes take off and land. At first, it was cool, but then I got my first taste of diesel fuel in my mouth, sitting on the back deck while I was, having a little snack after work.
What were you
And I
eating?
thought, salsa and margaritas. So then it got a lot less cool to like sit on the back deck and watch the planes take off and land. But when I was doing my due diligence about buying the house, I found out about the 2009 agreement. So, it was signed into state law. It was going to be like a sweet little airport.
Okay.
And, I could just enjoy that. And if I have family in Philadelphia, maybe take a flight to Philly, but it was, like a small community airport. This idea that they're going to pave to 7,100 feet allows them to bring in 737s. Now, can they draw in 737s? Is there a market for that? Debates continue, but there's a big difference between a small community airport with an occasional flight to Philly, the emergency flights.
But are you guys
with
woken up every morning at 6:30?
5:30 they start.
I am. Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say, though, the
Yep.
noise and that kind of thing, and believe me, there are neighbors, especially the ones who are on the approach for landings,
Yeah.
who have just soot dropped on their roofs and stuff. We, where I am, I'm not affected that directly by that sort of impact, although who knows what kind of carcinogens and so on are ending up in the soil and everything. But I do think it's important to keep big picture stuff in mind here. This is an area that's heavily affected when there is a major storm. We have climate change, which is obviously a big issue for not just the neighborhood, but New Haven in general. And natural coastal barriers to storms are wetlands and marshes. And destroying that area or even, undermining, by putting impermeable surfaces like pavement down, undermining those defenses is going to be a real problem for not just Morris Cove, but could be a big problem for New Haven going forward as well.
For sure.
Also, New Haven has the highest lung cancer rates in Connecticut. So what you're dealing with, like Sean said, we have to look at the big picture because our issues are for our neighborhood. But then when you look at the bigger picture, you're looking at an area where you have the intersection of 91 and 95 already. The air quality is
And actually, that place in the
horrible.
annex where they meet is considered the highest recorded child asthma in the state, I believe.
Right.
Yes.
And we're downwind from that, and we're downwind from
And
the
then-
sewer treatment program.
And then there's the navigation, the port. So you have the ships coming in, which oftentimes you see black smoke coming out of. You have the incinerator, and we have already the existing airport traffic, plus the highways.
And you're listening to three people from Morris Cove, long-timers, who helped organize and successfully defeat an effort to lengthen the Tweed New Haven Airport runway, the paved runway. And you're listening to that on Dateline New Haven, WNHH, your home for community radio, 103.5, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. So you folks banded together. You didn't have much notice.
Yep.
You know, they
No, we had no
they
notice.
put into a bill that was about something completely different, solar energy, environmental bill.
They snuck it in.
Yep. And so that they thought, and then at the last few weeks of the state legislative session, proponents brought out the lobbying troops, business community, political leaders. Let's get this passed as sort of a way to overcome neighborhood opposition. How?
Fly over. Fly over.
When did you find out about it? How did you organize, and why?
So it's been a very busy 2 months, and I'm glad I looked at the timeline this morning to remember. So the bill was introduced, I believe, in early March, and the first rumblings of it, I believe, we got from you, Paul, from the New Haven Independent.
Glad
And
you guys are reading it.
of course. And quite a few of us filed testimony with objections at the end of March. So the bill.
But so Sean, you saw it. And you said, "I'm calling up my neighbors." Did Tanya, you see it, or Rachel? Were you on a
Right.
Facebook page? How
So-
did it happen?
So we already, because of the previous battles with the airport, especially the last big one in 2014, 2015, when they had that big meeting that became an issue for the mayor down at the airport, we already have a sort of a grassroots network through that. And like any group, we've got maybe a dozen or more core people, and then we go around, we talk to neighbors, and we bring
And does
other
it
people
hurt
in.
that, Sean, you're an IT specialist? You're pretty good at throwing up a website or social media?
That can help.
And is that your role?
Yeah, that is my role.
Because I was
partially.
very impressed in how
Yeah.
you got a lot of information out.
Yep.
You
Oh,
were
yeah.
all over as soon as stuff happened without being personal, coming up with how the process works, responding to people on the other side with facts, lots of facts.
So and
It was
we,
a very good job at organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And anything. I know I became sort of the public face for a little while because I was being the loudest. But obviously there's a lot of people behind this whole thing, and I can do it without the wonderful people around me.
And a bunch of people have been doing research, so we've all picked different topics in a way.
Mhm.
My particular topic, and so Tanya's been doing a lot on the health impacts. I've been doing work around the environmental issues. And speaking of storytelling, when I realized in 2014, 2015 about this, Tim Larson, State Senator Tim Larson, recommended whoever wanted to go on a tour of Tweed. So I took him up on that, and he drove us around and took us upstairs and all Robinson side and everything like that. And I was really dumbstruck by going to the south end of the airport runway and seeing deer and egrets and wetlands and marshes right at the end of the airport runway.
And that's the beginning of the nature preserve.
And that's
too.
right at the beginning of the nature preserve. And I was just dumbstruck, like, oh my gosh. And then looking, starting to do independent research, looking at the wildlife fence environmental assessment that was done, and noting the number of threatened birds and endangered wildlife that are in the coastal floodplains that surround the airport, and that are just a rock throw from the runway.
And one reason people moved Morris Cove, is it fair to say, is the environment.
Of
I
course.
mean, this is an amazingly beautiful
Yeah.
area that's right by the harbor.
And that's a
Yeah.
benefit for all of New Haven. So one of the things I want to make sure, especially the previous round in 2015, it becomes this thing where people say, well, there's those cranky barbarians at the gate over there in Morris Cove, and they're sort of separate and so on and so forth. But the East Shore is enjoyed by New Haven and should be enjoyed by New Haveners in general. If you go down and you see East Shore Park, it's very vibrant now, the last few years especially, during soccer games,
we
baseball.
got the fishing
and so on.
pier. Yeah.
The
Oh,
fishing
yeah.
pier is a good thing. So, this
And
is
Lighthouse
something,
Park, the
and this is our
jewel thing.
only major beach access, keep in mind, in our shoreline New England city. So, Lighthouse Park is kind of a big deal to keep nice and as well.
Is that threatened by the airport, Lighthouse Park?
Yes, because what's wild is the north end of the runway is 12 feet above sea level. The south end of the runway, as it currently stands, is 6 feet above 6 feet above sea level. So it's really a water chute from the top of the runway down to the end of the runway and into Morris Creek Nature Preserve, which runs out into the left-hand side of Lighthouse Park, the main beach. Then you see that channel.
I'm
and
sorry,
then the other
Morris
side-
it goes into Morris Creek,
Morris Creek Nature Preserve, yeah.
and then that shoots water into.
Straight into Long Island Sound on the left-hand border. What would you call it? Not the left-hand border.
New Haven
But-
Harbor
Yeah, it goes right into New Haven
and
Harbor.
Long
so
Island Sound.
the border
Nice.
between New Haven and East Haven.
And what
that
actually
section.
goes in this water chute from the
So it would be-
slanted
yeah.
runway?
Yeah, anything that's on the runway, whether
De-icing.
De-icing's
that's
a
trash,
big-
de-icing, soot, gas, the leaded avgas that's used by general aviation.
And that brook was rerouted already once. If you can look at the maps pre-2009, people say, well, they didn't really expand their footprint, but you can see a complete rerouting of Tuttle Brook there, which feeds into Morris Creek. And then the whole area, there's now just impermeable fill.
So the big picture.
And that was our big giveaway in 2009.
but-
To be clear, we got something great, which was the limitation of the runway, and we gave up hugely on environmental sustainability of the coastal floodplains and of the wetlands and of the tidal creek and of the nature preserve and of the impact to New Haven Harbor.
But don't forget that I think people may not understand that when you have the runoff, you have all the de-icing agents and
Yeah.
anti-icing chemicals that are needed for aviation. and these do not break down. And they're propylene and ethylene glycol, and these are both carcinogens. And what happens is as they're run off into the creek and the tidal marsh, the EPA has actually said that acute exposure by ingestion of this causes central nervous system depression and cardiopulmonary effects and renal damage. So what you have is you have these algae blooms in New Haven Harbor. And you see, when you live on the seawall and you walk along the seawall every day, you see these algae blooms, and you see that certain times the quality of the water is not healthy. And this can lead actually to dead zones. This has been being talked about a lot now lately.
Mark Lasloff writes in, I'm just trying to get his full comment in here. I can't get this on. He says that, so no one on the panel today is pro-airport expansion.
Correct.
Not a balanced discussion. I will tell you, Mark, thank you for that comment. We had Mayor Tony Harp here on 2 separate shows who spoke at length about airport expansion, as did someone from Morris Cove, from the management team, Lisa Malone, who was in favor of airport expansion. Mark writes, I have empathy for these folks, but I own a business in New Haven that requires people flying in and out. I travel myself. Some of these arguments would indicate we should stop all the travel altogether. In the end, the state needs to develop economically, or there will be few jobs for those folks who live in Morris Cove or anywhere else. So transportation is key to expansion, and expansion of Tweed will lead to economic expansion for the area, which, by the way, Ned Lamont, the leading candidate for governor, embraced Tony Hart's position for expansion, the mayor of New Haven, in return for her endorsement.
And they did that at Tweed Airport.
At Tweed Airport. So what's your response to Mark? You've heard this.
I need to respond to this because I understand that. But what you have to do is you have to look at the health effects of this. At what cost? At what cost are we going to make that kind of progress? Because then we're going to have consequences that are going to last a long time. You have 20,000 children in the public schools in New Haven that are within a 7-mile radius of that airport. The particulate matter, I don't know if people understand what happens to particulate matter. You actually, there's small microparticles that actually get ingested through breathing in the fumes. They lodge into your lungs, which cause lung cancer, and then they actually impact your circulatory system, they impact your heart, and they impact your brain because you have the buildup of this inside your veins, and then you have reduced blood flow to your brain. So I understand that people are concerned about the environmental impact, but in this day and age, you cannot take that separately from the health concerns. The health concern is the most important.
And Mark says if health ethics are the primary concern, then we should eliminate all airports and air travel.
I'm happy
but that's
to.
not
Nobody's
realistic.
talking about that.
I'm happy to
Nobody here is
embrace
talking about
the economic aspect of it too, because this is an important part of our argument as well. The airport is a dead duck as far as I'm concerned. It's been failing for a very long time. Go to one of the board meetings, look at some of the numbers. They're talking they need 240,000 enplanements just to quote-unquote break even.
Explain that.
So enplanements...
How many do they have a year now? That's how many times a plane comes
About
into
28K, between 27 and 28K. And it may go up a little bit with the new jet service, but it's never been higher than 40, 45 in the past 20 years.
Even at their heyday.
Yeah, so, and that includes the spike with Delta and everything a few years ago. So, but at any rate, also, I just think it's disingenuous for New Haven businesses, especially the large corporations in New Haven, who shall go unnamed,
like some that might have moved. Okay.
Well, Lexian, the whole Lexian thing, I'll tackle next, Paul. But
that was about that was having a job. That is having a business environment where people feel they were skilled labor and that kind of stuff.
Well, they closed their Providence, Rhode Island operation. Is that Tweed's fault? I mean, they did a major restructuring. I think it's very false to blame that. But at any rate, the issue where large corporations in New Haven are not committing to Tweed now and showing that they want to kind of feed the airport now and help the airport be sustainable now puts a lot of skepticism in my heart that they're going to be committing even if service does increase.
Well, anyway, your point's well taken. Every time they said there's going to be a new airline, we got Chicago service. It didn't last very long.
Right.
The trend right now is against regional airports. The response you folks get is if you think it's not going to work, then why are you opposing it?
There's many, many examples.
Because of the environmental issues for me.
But they're
And the
saying
health.
they're saying if the planes will never come, what are you worried
The
about?
paving itself.
The paving itself.
So let's think about this. 500 feet between the end of the runway and which is now compacted, which was the runway safety area, provides a stronger chute, right? The water chute of all these agents that are harmful environmentally and for health purposes at the cost of $25 million. Why would it cost $25 million to pave 1,000 feet? Because you're paving wetlands, you're paving a sponge. And so that's what you're, if you want to look at the quality of the environment there, you can't ever get that back. Once you pave and compact and poison wetland areas.
So your
you cannot
response
get
to
back.
the argument that, well, if you think it's a dead duck and it's not going to succeed, you're saying the actual paving itself will
Well, the
cause
expansion in
damage
general.
whether or not the planes come.
Yeah.
Right, and that's
And
look
the cost to
around
taxpayers,
us.
both city,
Yep.
state, and federal tax. I mean, like the money that's been poured in there is outrageous. in my
Cities are
mind.
surrounded by projects that are destructive, which leave a footprint that cannot be removed. Once that pavement goes down, it never comes back up. These kind of Dick Lee style,
Right.
construction projects, we're still dealing with them in New Haven. And here we are, we're going to take this neighborhood, which is in a crucial point in its history with the impact of climate change, and we're going to basically destroy it.
And can I just
one thing-
add?
yeah.
Can I add? So in terms of economic development, right, which we're all in favor of, we've got the New Haven has the intersection of I-91 and I-95, two major intersections. It's got a Acela traffic stop. It's got a deep water port. It's got an internationally renowned university, and it's got major biotech investments and research. I feel strongly we don't need all the things. We don't need to have every last thing in order to have a successful city. We need good planning, and we need the community and the city to be responsive to its actual
And you're also talking about how you
residents.
define success, which would include certain kinds of neighborhoods that the city enjoys and environmental
and
balance,
Quality of life.
quality of life.
And what is innovative about pre-recession style growth ideology, where everything has to grow, 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 just for it to be successful? That's not to me innovative, which is one of the reasons I take a little bit of, when this becomes part of the quote unquote innovative strategy for New Haven, just because we can fly in a few people for startups supposedly, or because supposedly Alexian left because of Tweed now.
But
It's-
again, at what cost?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not innovative to destroy the environment and to wreck the health and quality of life of New Haven residents.
Back to the highway. Here's an example for you. A brownstone on Orange Street between Clark and Pearl. People on the 4th floor had their windows open. The carbon monoxide alarms went off. The fire department came. There was no carbon monoxide in the building. You know where it was from?
The highway.
Yeah. And the fireman told me that.
I would never want to live under there.
But so already we're dealing with those things.
But think about what you just said, right? This is exactly the situation our entire area is looking at. And I do want to keep in mind that half the airport is on the East Haven side, perhaps more of the airport property. And there was no notification, no community meetings. We had to struggle just to get community meetings here and so on and so
Right.
forth.
I don't even really want to talk about the political process because we know what happened there. Like, and I'm by the way agnostic about the airport. I definitely see both sides, and I've never believed that you're going to have this business renaissance and all the airlines are going to come. Obviously, when this agreement was grown in 2009, it was signed by people who say we'll get as much as we can now, put off the battle for another day. So Mayor Tony Harp said her understanding when she signed it was that allows the pavement, the runway to be reopened another time, whatever. That we knew there'd be another day. She said, the industry changes, the reality on the ground changes. But this is really about what defines success and what rights the neighborhoods have and how it fits into the bigger picture. So one question you're always hear is, why did you move there if you knew there was an airport? There used to be more commercial flights. Now, Rachel, you said you moved back because of the 2009 agreement. You believed.
And I guess I was naive because I didn't know. I didn't have this sense from our
I'm not
political
saying you're
leadership.
naive. I'm just saying that's
No,
your
I'm
answer.
saying I'm naive.
Your answer, there was that the mayors of both
I'm
cities
naive.
signed an agreement.
Yeah.
It was considered settled. And you bought your house saying, I can live with the way it is.
And she's not the only person. I've talked to several people who actually bought with that,
That line.
consideration.
Now, Tanya, for you, was it that you just lived your whole life there? You don't want to move a neighborhood you loved?
I love the water. I love New Haven. My great-grandfather was born in New Haven in 1888, and I feel connected to New Haven. I do still have hope that we can turn this thing around.
And you grew up there,
I did.
and you decided to settle there.
I settled there. I have my parents there, and we've contributed to the neighborhood. We keep our property in great shape. We're in addition to New Haven, we pay our taxes.
And when your parents bought a house there, were
Yes.
there as many flights as there are now? Were there more? Were there fewer? Were they different?
Well, in 1959, I really don't know what the situation was, but I did look up a map because one of the arguments is, well, the airport's always been there. Well, if you look at a 1934 map, the airport wasn't there. So the airport hasn't always been there. And it really started out as a small little plane, small planes, commuter planes. I have friends that actually have had airplanes there, and I've gone up in an airplane. My fantasy was kind of to learn how to fly, but then they got rid of the flight school there because
After the fatalities.
Yeah,
So,
they have-
Sean, when did you move back?
2013. I love New Haven. Spent much time in New Haven. I was back and forth actually in the interim years as well. Great city or greatest city is what I say about the Elm City. But to be honest with you, Paul, I think that asking people who are in the path of industrial expansion why they moved there, what their reasons are for being there, rises to the intellectual bar of asking people to get out because they're immigrants here. I really think it's the get out kind of attitude, and I embrace people who move there now. I want new neighbors. The character and literally the ethnicity of the neighborhood is changing so that we can get away from this idea that we're not a diverse community and so on and so forth. We have a lot of people from Black, Latina, and Latino communities moving into East Haven, moving into the Cove, and buying houses there, and they should not feel unwelcome as well.
I'm just saying, what was your thought process when you moved in? Did you say, I can live with the way it is, but there's
Yes.
this agreement? Did you feel the way Rachel did? Did you feel
I
like
never
it was
trusted
settled?
the airport. No, I didn't feel it was
So
settled.
why did you
because
move back if you thought the airport was going to be a problem and you didn't like living there?
I'm used to struggles, so it doesn't bother me. But
Did you think on balance it was a great enough neighborhood and you grew up there that you were willing to fight for it?
absolutely, and also, look, the airport could fail at any moment just because the political powers that be that are boosting it up with our public money decide not to do so anymore.
Mhm.
So, tomorrow they could just say, hey, throw their hands up in the air and be done with it if they want to be. I actually think that we will see a reality within my lifetime, I hope, where the airport is either a small, sustainable, actual prop plane style airport, or they go belly up, which is the direction they're moving in if they keep trying this ridiculous expansion plan that they're pushing.
And then the other thing too is that it impacts the whole shoreline. I mean, I don't know if anybody's here been on the highway when you have a traffic jam, and especially in the summertime or when you have like graduations of colleges and the whole Northeast is moving around, and then you're going to add an airport to that. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
So I've talked to some of your neighbors who are in favor of it. So John Cirillo said he used to be against it, but he likes to be able to walk to the plane, and he's involved with the Chamber of Commerce, and he bought the idea that it will improve business. Lisa Malone says she's been there 25 years. She says she kind of likes to see things happening in New Haven, more people coming in and out. That's sort of the other. I mean, I love the idea. I rarely fly, and if it were easy to get to Bradley, I'd be fine. I think they should fix that train thing and the connections there.
And they're working on it.
I've loved being able the few times to fly to go so conveniently close. I hated going through TSA because the only time I ever went where they gave me a hard time about having religious to fill in.
If we're
They
going to get
looked at it and it's like, what are these weird Jewish things you put on your head? Like I was some kind of terrorist, but I don't know why that happened.
if we're listen, if we're going to get personal,
Yeah.
we're going to ask John Cirillo, the Chamber of Commerce man and local politician, his opinion. Then we should ask him why he moved back onto Townsend Avenue, far away from the approach of the airport, because he did do that. So.
This is an interesting statistic, too. In the first 2 minutes after a 747 takes off, it emits as much pollution as 3,000 cars.
Mm. And as I said earlier, one reason people move to Morris Cove, it's the place you go if you love the environment.
Right. And there's a lot of seniors in the neighborhood and a lot of kids and several schools. And you were talking about the number of schools within the 7-mile radius. And air pollution sinks. It doesn't rise.
Mm.
And children and our elders are more susceptible to that than others. One thing that we haven't brought up, Paul, which is a huge concern of mine, is climate change, the sea level rise, and the path of storms shifting and changing. I mean, we've seen the destruction of these tornadoes, which is just awful, to my favorite park, Sleeping Giant Park. My favorite woodsy park. My favorite park is Lighthouse Park, of course. But my favorite Woodsy Park is Sleeping Giant, and it's been really devastated. They're thinking they're not going to reopen it until the fall. And the great thing about wetlands and coastal floodplains and tidal creeks, all of which are present on the property of Tweed, are that they act as buffers and sponges and a braking mechanism for storm winds and for flooding and tidal surges. And the more that we pave and the more that we muck around with, Tuttle Brook, and the more that we mess with the ecology of that area, of the wetlands and the marshes, the more we degrade the ability of that very precious type of environment to really save us in the case of another superstorm.
And we're talking about Tweed, New Haven Airport with Morris Cove neighbors and activists Sean O'Brien, Tanya Giacomini, and Rachel Harima. And so what next? So you were successful. You got the head of the state Senate, represents your area.
So wheels are already turning to try to turn that success into something else. I think a lot of the conversation, as it should have been towards the end of the process, was that the community was not engaged enough. So finally, we had, Ned Lamont reached out to me. I spoke to him on the phone for a while.
What was that like?
He's just a guy.
Did you feel that he was listening to you? And because he said to me, "Well, I'm for expanding it along with the neighbors." So what if the neighbors don't want it expanded? Like, did you guys find stuff you could agree with? Like, one thing he talked about was property tax breaks that the state would pay for.
So I will say that he listened to me. We had a short conversation. His campaign manager, I believe, is going to be living in the Cove while he runs his campaign. But, I wasn't necessarily convinced that he wouldn't sway one way or the other. I think what he was trying to do was set up a community meeting, potentially to save a little bit of face. From a political perspective, it may not have been the wisest thing in the world for him to do his announcement at the airport, considering how things went. And
then not engage with any of the community neighbors that came out to talk with him and engage with him on that. He didn't take any questions from neighbors at that event.
So they had this short timeline. They were trying to get the bill done fast, so they had a whole bunch of community meetings in a few weeks.
And then nothing. Now it's birds chirping again.
So Tony Harp says we're going to keep trying to make the case. He said, now she made concessions. He said they're paying to soundproof your houses.
No, that's not a concession. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Tell me. I want to know, Rachel.
That's not a concession. That's something that's required by the FAA, and that was done well in advance of 2014 and 2015, and they stalled out on that process, and it's only been since the neighborhood has said, what the heck are you doing? Why are you trying to reanimate, a dead agreement? That they're saying now, oh, okay, we'll complete the project. But that's been on the books, and that's not a community benefit. That's a mitigation of known harm as required by the FAA.
And it also, not everybody can sign up for the plan because of the FEMA limits on the construction. It's based on those old numbers. And
it's based on faulty data. It only took into account commercial aviation. It did not take into account any of the noise related to general aviation.
So is there any circumstance under which you support further pavement?
No. Because of the environmental issues, I do not. I mean, I don't know if you know, like the work that's been done with Plum Island, which is out, like this really great, environmentally rich. It's in New York. It's in Suffolk County of New York, and Connecticut Fund for the Environment. A whole bunch of tri-state area work has been done to save this. Well, they found 220 species of birds, like a quarter of the North American birds travel through Plum Island, and the same thing could and should be happening in this area. I mean, we have the hawk watch every fall because of the amazing migration pattern that flows this way. And the more we pave, the more we pollute. So if they double
soundproofed your house, that's not going to change
what
you're breathing on your back porch.
Exactly.
I think the question needs to be, do improvements to and remediation of these problems already, do improvements to the area, services for the area, do they have to hinge on this expansion? I do think, if there were a loud enough voice of people saying, hey, we'll allow you to do this little bit for XYZ, who knows? And it's not my place to tell people, what they should believe and what they think is best for the neighborhood. However, we can't trust them. First off, that line, it said nothing about 6,600. Now we're hearing it actually was 7,100 and so on and so forth. And the second thing is I don't think we should bargain away the neighborhood just for things that are improvements to the air and remediation for the problems that already exist.
Well,
So is it fair to say
very
that no matter
probable.
what concessions or whatever they're going to call them, there's really no price you have, right?
Well,
You don't want the
No.
airport to expand.
And is this just another stopgap? Like, what's next?
Mhm.
You know, is it 8,500 feet?
Right.
Is it 10,000 feet? Are you going to take away a couple more, streets and pave those and have,
They've rerouted. They've rerouted streets. They've destroyed houses. They're
pulling down mature
this-
trees already.
this constant barrage over the last 50 years. It is so stressful to live in that. I mean, and we're fighting. When we fight for everyone, because the health is going to impact everyone. It really is. And the thing is that's not easy to do, to have this constant barrage of coming up against. Like, I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
We all
to
have
me.
rich, full, delightful lives outside of
So Mark
Tweed
Lessoff,
advocacy.
Mark Lessoff asks, where should we put airports? Like, is Bradley in a good spot?
Bradley's
Yes.
in a great spot. It's got a big field surrounding it. If and when, God forbid, planes crash, they don't land on houses with families in them.
But even there, if you lived up there, do we need as much air travel as we have? Is it essential to business?
Well,
That's-
that's
that's-
a different conversation.
Right, it's an interesting
It's an
conversation.
interesting conversation, but
I think regionalizing is very useful, and I think Connecticut is, so parochial in its, ways of looking at things. And in terms of what's been happening on the state level, if you look at the way the state government has been looking at Yukon as kind of like the flagship and putting money there, I personally think Bradley can be a great airport,
And
an
also-
And they did
international airport,
invest.
and it
and
can-
it's got the capacity
They
to
did
fly
invest.
internationally.
But also the other
the
thing
shuttles
is,
and
would
things.
if you expand Tweed, would that cannibalize Bradley?
Because
which
Bradley's
doesn't
hurting
have,
too. Yeah.
Bradley doesn't have that. It's on a floodplain.
So how do we get better transportation to Bradley?
Rail.
Rail and shuttles.
Hourly shuttles could be done. But I mean, the question you ask, I think, is appropriate because
Because I know Marquisha works here. She was there trying to get a plane one night. She doesn't have a car, and they canceled the flight. She couldn't even get from the airport to a place to sleep,
Oh, yeah.
let alone
Yeah.
to a bus that would get her back to New Haven.
and they do have hotels around there. So
yeah, but she'd
that's
have to
just
walk a
poor
mile with all
services.
her bags in
Yeah.
bad weather at 10:30 at night.
And
you know?
also, if you park your car there, they give you transportation. But if
Mhm.
you don't have a car, then that's an issue.
Right.
And that's the other thing. It's the socioeconomic impact too, because the people who are rich enough can move out to Clinton and Madison and Guilford, and then use the airport. But the people who are the poorest are the ones that are staying in the city that have no choice. They don't have the options that some of the
So what kind of
other peop-
hourly shuttles do you envision, like to Bradley? Like a public shuttle, or because now with the shuttle you have to like do it 3-4 hours in advance.
I mean, I don't know exactly what should be done, but it seems to me that if you're going to spend millions of dollars just on paving a small overrun for a few
1,000 feet,
flights,
yeah.
right? Then and that's the proposal. Then you could definitely have an hourly shuttle of some kind.
And actually, Uber
25
isn't
million
bad.
buys a lot of shuttles.
Yeah, Uber isn't bad.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, Uber's great.
But the Amtrak is also not so bad, right? And Metro North is also not so bad. We're talking 2 hours to New York, 2 hours and change maybe to Boston. This isn't a ridiculously difficult city to get to. I understand that people want to be able to get off of their plane and immediately be here, but it does not seem to me that if that's what's holding a business back from getting talent, I would be very surprised.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm agnostic is because I've been a reporter for over 30 years, and it is an article of faith for business. It's a religion. They believe all economic problems are solved with the airport having more service.
Right.
I've seen enough service come and not last that I think it's a very important issue because it's about the quality of where you live, and for them, they believe it's the quality of the economy. When I step back, I really don't believe that our economy is going to live or die based on this, that I'm actually going to see it.
Yeah.
And that's
Well, and with the big expansion in 2009, that was really it. This is what they absolutely categorically needed. And then it was going to flourish, and the planes were going to come, and the businesses were going to come. And here we are in 2018, and with the same rhetoric. All we need is this expansion, and the planes are going to come, and the businesses are going to come.
all right.
I don't buy it.
Well, thank you for coming. Did you fly
Thank
here? How'd
you.
you guys get here?
I sure did. I was late.
You were right on time.
I walked over from the Grove.
Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I want to
Thank
thank Sean O'Brien, Tanya Giacomini,
you.
and Rachel Harima for coming on Dateline New Haven and WNH to give us a side that hadn't been heard enough on this radio show from the neighborhood of Morris Cove.
Anytime.
And how you feel. I hope you will come back. And congratulations, no matter where you stand on this issue. We do believe in citizen action in New Haven, and you guys showed the way.
Mm-hmm.
Did our best.
And
Thanks a lot.
thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Book your flight with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.